We're discussing one of Cape Town's most divisive proposals, a 180 million rand security wall along the N2 near the airport. The city argues this is a critical safety measure to stop deadly stone-throwing attacks and robberies on the Hell Run, protecting residents and tourists alike. But for communities like Gugulethu, Nyanga and Khayelitsha that live alongside this highway, the wall is seen as a brutal symbol of exclusion, a way to hide poverty and reinforce apartheid-era spatial planning, rather than solve the root causes of the crime. Today we engage in a necessary and tough conversation about safety, justice and what kind of city Cape Town chooses to be. Movement for Care activist Nkosikhona Swaartbooi joins me now to chat more about this. Nkosikhona, I appreciate your time this morning. Now, it has been described, the wall has been described as a catastrophic failure of governance. But can you acknowledge that there are some families or victims like Leonie van der Westhuizen, Lucilla Flock or many other victims on the ongoing violence in the N2 itself who've suffered because of this?
Yes, the first thing is to offer condolences to all the families who have lost loved ones as a result of the violence that we're seeing on the N2, especially around Nyanga and in Cape Town. But also, I have to say that that the issue of murder in Cape Town is one that's really affecting the city. If you look at the statistics in terms of what the police have given us in terms of the murder rates in South Africa, the top 30 police stations with murders, 27 of those are from Cape Town, amounting for about 875 murders in Cape Town. So this is not just an issue about what happens on the N2, but perhaps it's an invitation to engage on the issue of how to keep Cape Town safe for all its residents, to ensure that all residents, whether they are motorists, residents or tourists, that they are kept safe in our city. And it's really disappointing for a municipality that claims to be inclusive, accessible and transparent, that they would allocate 180 million rands just to ensure that motorists are safe, when we have a gun and gang violence in Cape Town that affects many residents, amounting to many residents of Cape Town being gunned down and dying on a daily basis. And so this is an issue that should be put to a public participation process so that the residents of Cape Town can actually have a word in terms of what they think about this idea. It also, begs of the city of Cape Town to conduct an impact assessment to ensure that we look into how Cape Townians will be affected by this wall that will be built in our city. But also, we know that many Cape Townians are excluded from the budgeting process of the city of Cape Town. And so this begs for us to open up a space for Cape Townians to engage on whether it makes sense to build a wall of 180 million rands when about 600,000 people are still awaiting to get proper housing from the city of Cape Town.
So there are a couple of issues, Nkosikhona, that you raise, and one of those is obviously the cost of the wall. You suggest that 180 million rand is too much for this wall. Are you against the wall in its entirety, or are you against the amount of 180 million rand that's being spent on the wall?
I am against an approach that the city of Cape Town uses to address crime. Crime is not something that you can only address by policing. Crime is a social issue. And with us acknowledging that crime is a social issue, we ought to then treat it like that, to respond not only with policing and having, as the city says, boots on the ground in terms of having law enforcement, city police and SAPS. But these are issues that affect communities. We ought to have an approach that actually looks into how to provide jobs for the many young people that are unemployed. Also to ensure that we have programs that will assist young people to be involved actively in playing sports, because currently we are not doing enough there. When we are failing to address social issues, it is crime that will increase in our city. And we ought to sit with our residents and not be displacing crime, because how the city responds to crime currently in the city of Cape Town, it is displacing it. So when there's an issue in Khayelitsha, more policing is sent there. If there's a crime also happening in Nyanga, more police are moved from Khayelitsha to Nyanga. We are displacing crime and not rooting out what gives birth to the crime that we see in our city. Cape Town is becoming a murder capital. And that ought to be a conversation that we have in terms of how to ensure that all residents of Cape Town are kept safe. It is not only about looking into how we can keep our tourists safe. Yes, we have an obligation as a city to ensure that the visitors that do come in our city are protected, but they are not immune to the issues that are confronted by the municipality and the communities. We ought to look into strategies that actually addresses the root causes of crime. And one of those, it is the upgrading of informal settlements. It is the upgrading of the communities where it is hard to police, where criminals are hiding in those communities. So this is not just an issue where you can just allocate money and hope that a wall will stop a crime in Cape Town, because criminals can find a way of driving a car into that N2 and still commit crime. What is the strategy that the city of Cape Town and the mayor of Cape Town have in terms of addressing and rooting out the root causes of crime in our city, and not be displacing crime from one community to the other?
Nkosikhona, just walk us through what seems to be a little bit of an irony, right? Now, when we look at the incidence of crime at its highest in Cape Town, it's concentrated in the very areas that we're talking about. So the Cape Flats, Nyanga, Khayelitsha, Philippi, Mitchell's Plain. And over the last few months, we've reported on serious crime that's occurred, multiple deaths, shootings that are happening in those areas. Now, it's almost as if when individuals are driving on the other side of this wall that will go up, there is a reaction of, let's put up 180 million rand wall. But of consequence is the fact that on the other side of this figurative wall is the number of murders and killings that are going on. And how much money has the city of Cape Town put into addressing crime in these areas?
Correct. And this is one of the biggest issues we have in terms of Cape Town being an unequal city. It has been declared by institutions doing research that Cape Town is the most unequal city in the whole world. However, Cape Town has become #1 tourist destination in Africa, and that's something that we should be priding ourselves in. But if you look at where that money goes, where those billions go in terms of the tourism that Cape Town is benefiting money from, it's concentrated in former whites-only suburbs. It's concentrated in affluent areas, but we have not looked into how we can have tourism that's inclusive of everyone in our city. And if you then just focus on a PR and advertising Cape Town as a tourist destination without addressing social issues, you are then creating a recipe for a disaster, because you're inviting people into a city that is not safe for its own residents. As I've said, between July and September, we have not counted October, November, and December. 875 young people in particular, black and colored, have been murdered in Cape Town. That should be raising an alarm. That should be a reason for the mayor to actually convene his MACO members to say, what is our strategy in combating crime, in also addressing the root causes of crime in these areas. But we are not seeing much agency there, because it's Mitchell's Plain, where colored people live. It's Khayelitsha, it's Nyanga, Manenberg. It's only when it affects a particular race, it's only when it affects a particular people who come as tourists in our city, where we raise the alarm and say something needs to be done. What is the strategy that the mayor has in terms of combating crime in our city and ensuring that all the residents of Cape Town do live in a safe, equal society where everyone's life is valued the same way? And we're saying that this could be done, provided that the city doesn't impose those decisions and plans that they have. But this ought to be a conversation between Cape Town and its mayor to say, how do we keep our city safe, to ensure that the visitors that do come and visit our city are actually also safe as we are. It is only then that we can address these issues. But if we continue to throw money at issues when there are public uproar about issues, then it's a bad approach. It continues to exacerbate the fact that Cape Town is the most unequal society in the whole world.
Nkosikhona, I don't know if you've done the numbers, but if If the city of Cape Town was to spend 50, 60 or 70 million rand and spend it on these areas that we're talking about, the areas on that hell run, right? So we're talking about Gugulethu, Nyanga and Khayelitsha. So whether it's job creation or managing social services, would there then be need to build the wall, do you think?
I don't think there would be. And I mean, in Khayelitsha, we advocated in 2015 for the Khayelitsha Commission of Inquiry, which had clear recommendations. And part of those was an intergovernmental process where the city of Cape Town and the province, including national, ought to sit down and plan how they can upgrade informal settlements so that informal settlements, can be policed. We can have more policing walking around and more services brought into those communities. There are clear guidelines. There's a clear plan that has been produced through that commission of inquiry that Helen Zille established in 2014, the Khayelitsha Commission of Inquiry. None of those recommendations have been implemented. And we are now crying foul and only shocked now when we're seeing the results 10 years later, after the commission had given the Vusi Piccoli Commission of Inquiry had given clear recommendations in terms of how crime could be addressed in Cape Town. And part of that, or at the core of it, is the upgrading and the development of informal settlements to ensure that the residents do have services, including the services of their communities having police around and the police being visible in those communities. You cannot police poverty around. Poverty breeds inequality and crime. The main reason why we have young people involved in crime because they're unemployed, they're restless, and they're hungry. And up until we address that as a social issue, we will then see the results. But as we continue to pour money into policing poverty, we will continue having an unequal society. We will continue having Cape Town being unsafe for its residents as well as the visitors that do come. I don't believe that this wall is the solution for Cape Town. A solution would be an upgrading of informal settlements, job creations, programs for young people to ensure that we curb the restlessness that they have and get that energy into sports and other programs. For as long as we don't have that, we will play a reactive approach of always having to react when someone has been murdered, when more than 1,000 black and colored people have been murdered, particularly young people have been murdered in the city of Cape Town. And nothing has been said about that. No plan has been produced. No public uproar to say this is something this is a disaster. We live in a gun-violent city. We live in a gang-violent city, and nothing is being done. We are not seeing enough agency from the city of Cape Town, particularly the Mayor, Jordan Hill-Lewis himself, and his MECO members.
Nkosikhona, I appreciate your time. That's where we're going to leave that conversation. Movement for Care activists speaking around the proposed 180 million rand wall on the N2 highway passage that has been proposed.